Hi there, I'm Arius, and today we are going to manipulate your database data using the Power Pages Client API. To manipulate data in Dataverse using scripting in Power Pages, so I'm not talking about here updating with a form, but rather something with code, something custom, you are going to use the Portal's Web API. And that means that we are generally bound to what the Portal's Web API can do and can't. For general usage of the Web API, I've made a video some time ago. I will link it in the description below. In general, it works something like this. So we have an update, for example, so that has similar to the Dataverse. If you know that, it's like /API/data, then / a version, and then you go with the entity logical collection name. And for an update, you also need to give in the GUID of the record. And then they've just put in here a body with a JSON where they, for example, update the name here. But to use this, first from the Design Studio, navigate to the Power Pages Management, then go to Site Settings, and then you want to create some site settings with the name Web API at the beginning. So in general, for your testing, it's a good idea to have Web API /error/inner error set to true to have better error messages in general. Then you need to enable an entity, and then you need to tell it which fields can be manipulated and read. You can also put in a star here to have all fields. However, even on an account where you say, okay, actually they can read everything, but can they really? Because things like created by, created on, or modified on might still be information that you want to hide from the public. Also in the Design Studio, make sure that you have a table permission. So I set up here one that is really bad in a production setup. Never use this. I have here global access, and then I've given all permissions to anonymous users. That, of course, would mean that if someone goes to my site and they can just first read all accounts and then delete them one by one, so they could totally clear my database. Very bad setup, but for my testing, it's of course perfect because I can do everything over the API without getting any 4 or 3 authorization errors, so my access is denied because I simply do not have the permissions to perform that operation. This is the list of my current accounts in the system. So I will refresh it. We have 11 accounts currently in here, and we will now create a new one. So I hit preview on desktop. So in the console here, I will call Power Pages Client API.WebAPI.createRecord, and then inside the brackets, all parameters are the same as with the xrm.webapi.createRecord command that you know from Dataverse. So we have the entity logical name and then a JSON object of all the properties that we are going to set. And I'm just putting out the result to the console here. So we see we have a GUID of the account as the result. And if we take a look over at the network tab, we can see that we had a post to accounts with a payload. Here's the body. We see that we have a status code 204 no content. And actually, the ID of the account is either here found in entity ID, or you can also go with location, which has it here in the URL. So that is the API location in the Power Page. Or with OData entity ID, you could theoretically extract it from here as well. Here you see the structure that you know from Dataverse with the API/data/v9.1. So we can also read that record now with retrieve record. So I'm selecting only the name here. And because of the workings of these OData APIs, we get a little bit more back than the name. So for example, the account ID is always in there, but we see our names Power Pages We can also update the record. So again, we have here the entity logical name, the ID, and then a new object. So it's this time called Power Pages 2. And just the responses here, the data object. So to show you that this change was actually applied, we could look at Dataverse. So if we refresh over here, we see our Power Pages 2 account. However, we can also go with retrieve multiple records this time. We filter by this new name and then just log the results. And there we go. We had an array of entities, and in there we have the name Power Pages 2 for our B64F account. You can also see the OData annotations here with the state code. Finally, let's delete the record again. And in this case, we just get an undefined response. There is nothing anymore that could be returned. So over at the network tab, if we take a look here at the delete of this account, we again have a 204 no content. However, this time the headers are less interesting. So if we hop over to all accounts again and refresh, the account is gone again. We are back to 11 rows. So working with the Web API in Power Pages is as easy or as hard, depending on your standpoint, as in Dataverse. The Power Pages Client API can help you structure your requests. However, it cannot help you with your security setup. So make sure you have your site settings and permissions set up correctly, because a user that is familiar with JavaScript can always manipulate your front-end code to perform operations that you didn't intend. So you need to secure them via the API, via the backend. Otherwise, you could lose data. But with a good security setup, so for example, when an attacker can only manipulate their own data, the Web API gives us the freedom to program very cool pages. And that's it for this video. Bye!